LinkedIn presents.
What would happen if China and the United States both scrambled for the few good parts of the moon? If you talk to some people, this new space race has already started. And whereas the first space race was about who could get people on the moon first, a second space race is liable to be about something much more conflict-prone: turf.
Good morning. I'm your host, Michael Kovnat, and this is the Next Big Idea Daily, where we highlight great ideas from nonfiction authors to explore the questions shaping our future. Now, as Donald Trump settles into office, we'll probably be seeing even more of First Buddy Elon Musk and his signature Occupy Mars t-shirt. But what does that shirt really mean? Even with Musk's financial and engineering muscle, are we actually capable of regularly traveling to and even living on other planets? And even if we can do it, should we? That's the question posed by Kelly and Zach Weinersmith in their new book, A City on Mars. Can we settle space? Should we settle space? And have we really thought this through? Kelly is a biologist and adjunct faculty member at Rice University whose research has appeared in The Atlantic and National Geographic, while Zach is the creator of the popular webcomic Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal. Together, this wife and husband team blend humor and hard science to critically examine humanity's next great adventure and its potential pitfalls. Kelly joins us to share their key ideas right after this break.
From LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, host of Everyday Better, an award-winning podcast dedicated to personal development. Join me every week for captivating stories and research to find more fulfillment in your work and personal life. Listen to Everyday Better on the LinkedIn Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Most of the arguments in favor of space settlements are bad. There are a lot of aspirational arguments that say we need to go to space soon to save the environment, to become a wiser species, to end war, to end poverty, or to reinvigorate a wimpy, bureaucratized, homogenized Earth. The short version is that none of this stuff is likely. The environmental ideas won't work soon enough to stop climate change and might never be cheaper than things we can already do on Earth. There's no evidence humans become wise or unified or peaceful because of space launch. And we're unlikely to get rich because even fantastic drops in the cost of space launch will long cost a fortune simply to access, much less use. Often these ideas are based on folk beliefs, not held by actual scholars, like the idea that war is typically about scarcity or territory, or that human wealth is mostly about mineral resources. The idea that space travel makes you wise largely derives from the writings of a single philosopher, but the empirical evidence is limited and weak. Even the platitudes of astronauts about the view from space aren't always right. The phrase, "you don't see borders up there," is used often but isn't even correct. You can see borders between, for example, North and South Korea. Nor would it even be wisdom to not see where the light stops and the darkness begins. The environmental arguments might sound more plausible, but they won't work in this decisive century for climate change. Consider, moving humans and industry to space could conceivably reduce our burden on the planet. But simply to keep population steady at current birth rates, we'd have to move something like 220,000 people to space per day. We currently have no way to get that many people to space and no way to house them. Maybe it'll work in the 22nd century, but it's not going to save us now. Unfortunately, aspirational arguments for space settlements are not well grounded in data. We don't know enough about how bodies and minds respond to space in order to settle it safely. Most of what we know about how bodies and minds respond to space comes from data from astronauts residing aboard space stations orbiting the Earth for very short periods. These data are not super useful if you want to know how a human will fare when they're spending their whole lives living in a place like Mars, which has more radiation and less gravity than Earth. What science we have from the International Space Station is ominous. Life in microgravity degrades bone, muscles, and eyesight. The 1/6 Earth gravity of the moon and the 2/5 Earth gravity of Mars may be enough to keep bodies healthy, but for now, we have no clue. Also, what data we do have may not be applicable to all humans. Astronauts have mostly been male, middle-aged, ultra-elites, very few of whom went up for more than half a year, with the record consecutive stay being 437 days. There are animal experiments too, but they're short and unsystematic. This lack of knowledge is especially worrisome when you realize that a successful space settlement will need to allow for human reproduction. We know even less about this than we know about human physiology in space. We have no idea if humans can be conceived, gestated, and born off-world, and we really don't know if those babies can grow up to have babies of their own. Even if we can get this knowledge ethically, it'll take at least decades and will be quite expensive. But without that knowledge, any large-scale space settlement will effectively be experimenting on babies. We don't yet know enough about how to build space habitats and closed-loop ecosystems to settle Mars. With current technology, it takes about 6 months to get to Mars. Once there, you have to wait about a year until a launch window opens so you can start the 6-month trip home. Your equipment better be damn reliable. And it'll always be expensive to ship supplies to Mars and will at least initially be difficult to extract resources from the red planet itself, so you'll want to be able to recycle as much as you possibly can. Like everything, including human waste products. It's gonna need to be incorporated back into a built ecosystem. How good are we at building these kinds of recycling systems? On the International Space Station, some water gets recycled, which is why the potable water on orbit is sometimes referred to as yesterday's coffee. But that's pretty much it for space recycling. Down on Earth, the largest closed-loop ecosystem ever attempted was Biosphere 2 in the 90s. It was a 3.14-acre facility which housed 8 people for 2 years. Things went okay. They all survived, but by the time the experiment was over, they were starving. At one point, they were getting headaches as carbon dioxide levels soared and oxygen had to be pumped in. They also split into 2 hateful factions and were even spitting on each other at one point. All subsequent studies have been smaller, and none have even attempted to fully close the loop. So the best closed ecology we've ever done barely kept 8 people alive. Elon Musk wants 1 million people to Mars in about 25 to 35 years. But scaling something like Biosphere 2 to 1 million people would likely require a greenhouse operation the size of Singapore. Even if we somehow can deliver that much material to Mars, we don't know how to run such a vast sealed ecosystem because, like with the science of human reproduction, there's precious little funding. We need the science if we want a space settlement. The people in Biosphere 2 had to be saved by outside help. That won't be possible on Mars. With the current state of international space law, a scramble for land or resources in space could create conflict between nuclear powers back here on Earth. Space sucks. A lot. In our solar system neighborhood, the places that suck the least for humans are probably the Moon or Mars. While Mars definitely has a lot more of the stuff that humans need to stay alive, the Moon is closer. So the Moon is probably where we're going to go to figure out the things we need to know to live in space. But some parts of the Moon suck less than other parts. At the lunar equator, there's no water. Plus, nights and days are 2 Earth weeks long, meaning you need very robust equipment and batteries or nuclear power to survive the night. But at the poles, there are small areas where high crater rims catch near perpetual sunlight, while also enclosing the only lunar reserves of water in the form of really hard ice. The total area of these special spots is minuscule, something like a few hundred acres depending on what you're willing to count. Nations that want permanent moon bases will want to get to these best spots first. But international law is very unclear about what they can do there. Under the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, nations can't claim moon territory. But at least under the interpretation of this treaty favored by the United States and a number of our allies, they can use lunar resources ad libitum. That means, in principle, highly limited lunar water resources are finders keepers. So, what would happen if China and the United States both scrambled for the few good parts of the moon? If you talk to some people, this new space race has already started. And whereas the first space race was about who could get people on the moon first, a second space race is liable to be about something much more conflict-prone: turf. We need a legal system that can regulate these claims before the fighting starts. Space won't solve existential risk, but solving existential risk might get you to space. Given the difficulty of settling space, those who favor it generally come to the table with aspirational goals for humanity. One of the most plausible is that a second human civilization is essentially a backup copy for our species in case we accidentally, nuke this one, or cook it, or it gets hit by an asteroid. In this vision, space settlement is a plan B, which makes space settlement a worthy goal, regardless of risk or short-term return on investment. We don't believe space provides a short-term refuge from any current problem. It's too hard, too expensive. But if it is truly the case that settling Mars makes us safer as a species, perhaps we should begin to move forward with that now, even if none of us currently living are likely to see this project completed. It's a nice idea, but the danger is that settling Mars could actually increase the risk for our species, either by sparking a dangerous scramble for turf or simply by requiring a vast infrastructure made of large, heavy, fast-moving objects flying over Earth perpetually, controlled by a variety of nations, corporations, and perhaps even individual people. If humanity had some kind of Star Wars-y force field technology to stop the heavy stuff from entering our atmosphere, or if war and terrorism were unthinkable, then we wouldn't have to worry about stuff falling on us from the heavens. But we don't have this technology, and we've not moved beyond conflict on Earth. Our ability to harm ourselves vastly outweighs our ability to protect ourselves. As long as that's the case, settling the solar system will likely increase risks to our species. During the last century, humanity has stacked up a good half dozen brand new modes of self-annihilation. Do we really want to add one more? This doesn't have to be a pessimistic vision. In fact, if anything, our work convinced us that there's lots of amazing work to be done in every field, from biology and physics to international relations. We're not saying we should never settle space. We're simply saying that going to space will not make us a better species. We should become a better species if we want to go to space.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, listeners, you can get yourself a copy of A City on Mars at your favorite bookstore. For more great insights from the latest nonfiction, head on over to your app store and download our Next Big Idea app. It's got thousands of big ideas from hundreds of authors. I'm Michael Kovnat. See you tomorrow.